Is the 6,000-year prophecy ending next month? What if the end of the 6,000-year prophecy is in a few days? What I'm about to share with you has been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years. Ancient Jewish sages saw it. Early Christian fathers taught it. Biblical scholars have calculated it. And they all point to the same stunning conclusion. You will be shocked when I reveal 6 discoveries about this prophecy. Discovery 1. The mystery in creation. Let me take you back to the very beginning, because what happened in the first 7 days of creation wasn't just God's work schedule, it was His prophetic blueprint for all of human history. And once you see this pattern, you'll never read Genesis the same way again. Genesis tells us that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and on the 7th day, He rested. Most people read this as a straightforward historical account of how the universe came into existence and move on to the next chapter without giving it a second thought. But what if the creation week was infinitely more than just history? What if every day of that first week was a prophetic preview of a 1,000-year epoch of human experience? The week wasn't just about the past, it pointed to the future. Think about this carefully. When God created the world, He could have done it instantly. He could have spoken everything into existence in a single moment. He's all-powerful. There's no limitation on His creative ability. So why did He choose to create over 6 days and then rest on the 7th? Why establish this specific pattern of work and rest? Why make it so deliberate, so measured, so precisely structured? Because He was encoding the entire timeline of human history into the creation week itself. Here's the key that unlocks everything, and it comes from the Apostle Peter himself. 2 Peter 3:8 gives us the divine equation for understanding prophetic time. But, beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. If 1 day equals 1,000 years from God's perspective, then the creation week becomes a 7,000-year roadmap for human history. Let me show you how this works, because the precision will absolutely stagger you. Day 1 equals years 1 to 1,000. From Adam to Noah, the age of innocence ending in judgment. Day 2 equals years 1,001 to 2,000. From Noah to Abraham, the age of conscience and covenant beginnings. Day 3 equals years 2,001 to 3,000. From Abraham to Moses, the establishment of God's chosen people. Day 4 equals years 3,001 to 4,000. From Moses to Christ, the age of law and prophetic preparation. Day 5 equals years 4,001 to 5,000. The early church age. The gospel spreads to the Gentiles. Day 6 equals years 5,001 to 6,000. The completion of church age. Think about the theological significance. 6 days of work represent 6,000 years of human effort to rule Himself. 6,000 years of trying to build paradise without God. 6,000 years of governments, philosophies, religions, and ideologies, all failing to create the perfect world. 1 day of rest represents 1,000 years of Christ doing what humanity could never do, ruling in perfect righteousness. The pattern is beautiful in its symmetry and profound in its implications. But notice something crucial about God's Sabbath rest on the 7th day of creation. It wasn't just the absence of work, it was the celebration of completed work. Genesis 2:2-3. And on the 7th day, God ended His work, which He had done, and He rested on the 7th day from all His work, which He had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work, which God had created and made. The seventh day wasn't empty rest. It was blessed and sanctified rest. This perfectly describes what the millennial reign will be like. It won't just be the absence of human struggle. It will be the presence of divine blessing. Christ won't just stop human rebellion. He will establish divine perfection. The seventh millennium will be the most blessed and sanctified period in all of human history. And here's what should make every believer's heart race with anticipation. If this timeline is accurate, then we're not just living through ordinary church history. We're living through the final chapter of the church age. We're not just believers among billions throughout history. We're potentially the final generation of believers before the rapture occurs and the millennium begins. We may be the generation that sees the transition from the age of grace to the age of glory. Discovery 2. Jewish and early Christian voices agree. Let me show you what the ancient sources actually taught, because what you're going to discover will absolutely blow your mind. The Jewish Talmud, written by rabbis centuries before Christ was even born, explicitly teaches the world is to exist 6,000 years. In the first 2,000, there was desolation. In the second 2,000 years, there was the Torah. And in the third 2,000 years is the time of the Messiah. But through our many iniquities, all these years have been lost. After this is the 1,000 years of Sabbath rest. Think about that. Jewish scholars who had no Christian theology to influence them believed the world would last exactly 6,000 years before entering a millennial Sabbath. Irenaeus, one of the most influential church fathers, wrote around 180 A.D., "For in as many days as this world was made, in so many thousand years shall it be concluded. And for this reason, the Scripture says, Thus the heaven and the earth were finished, and all their host. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it." This is an account of the things formerly created, as also it is a prophecy of what is to come. These weren't fringe beliefs. This was mainstream understanding. Jewish rabbis and Christian fathers, separated by culture and theology, independently arrived at the same timeline. They all saw the same pattern in Scripture. They all calculated the same 6,000-year framework. And if they were right, then everything changes in our lifetime. Discovery 3. Where are we now on God's clock? So where exactly are we on this 6,000-year timeline? When biblical scholars trace the genealogies and chronologies carefully, accounting for different manuscript traditions and calendar systems, they place us somewhere between 5,988 and 5,997 years since creation. That means we could be anywhere from 3 to 12 years away from hitting the 6,000-year mark. Let that sink in for a moment. If this timeline is accurate, we're not talking about centuries until the end of the age. We're not even talking about decades. We're talking about years. This may not just be a prophetic season, it could be the final seconds. And here's what makes this absolutely mind-blowing. We're approaching this timeline convergence during a period when every other prophetic sign Jesus mentioned is also coming to fulfillment. Israel back in their land? Check. Jerusalem under Jewish control? Check. The gospel being preached to all nations through technology? Check. Wars and rumors of wars increasing globally? Check. Natural disasters intensifying? Check. Spiritual deception spreading rapidly? Check. Every prophetic sign converging at the same time, we're approaching the 6,000-year mark. That's not coincidence. That's divine timing. Discovery 4. What happens at the 6,000-year mark? But what exactly happens when we reach the 6,000-year completion point? What I'm about to reveal will transform how you see not just current events, but the entire purpose and destiny of human civilization itself. According to both ancient Jewish understanding and early Christian teaching, the transition from the 6th millennium to the 7th millennium wouldn't be gradual or peaceful. It would be marked by the most catastrophic and transformative events in all of human history. And we may be witnessing the beginning of that transition right now. Let me show you what the ancient sources predicted about this transition period, because their descriptions are going to send chills down your spine when you compare them to what's happening in our world today. The Talmud describes this transition period as the footsteps of the Messiah, Ikveta Demeshicha in Hebrew. But this wasn't a peaceful, gradual approach. According to Jewish understanding, these footsteps would be a time of unprecedented trouble, confusion, moral collapse, and global upheaval immediately before the Messianic age begins. The Talmudic tractate Sanhedrin 97 describes the conditions during the footsteps of the Messiah. In the generation when the Son of David comes, scholars will be few, and as for the rest, their eyes will fail through sorrow and grief. Multitudes of trouble and evil decrees will be renewed, each new one worse than the preceding. Does that sound familiar? Rising deception among religious leaders, people's hearts failing them for fear, troubles multiplying and intensifying globally. But the Jewish sources aren't the only ones that predicted these transition conditions. Jesus himself described this exact period using remarkably similar language. Matthew 24:6-8. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Birth pangs, the footsteps of the Messiah. The final labor pains before the new age is born. Notice that Jesus calls these events the beginning of sorrows, not the end, but the beginning. The Greek word for sorrows is odin, which specifically refers to birth pangs, the labor pains that signal a baby is about to be born. Just like birth pangs increase in frequency and intensity right before delivery, the signs preceding Christ's return would accelerate as his coming approaches. And here's what should absolutely blow your mind about the timing. According to medical science, the most intense birth pangs happen in the final moments before delivery. If we're experiencing the birth pangs of the new age, and if they're increasing in intensity and frequency, then we may be very close to the delivery, the actual birth of the millennial kingdom. But let me show you something even more specific about what the ancient sources predicted would happen during this transition period. Irenaeus wrote about the final years before Christ's return. And when this Antichrist shall have devastated all things in this world, he will reign for 3 years and 6 months, and sit in the temple at Jerusalem. And then the Lord will come from heaven in the clouds, in the glory of the Father, and will send this man and those who follow him into the lake of fire. A global dictator, temple desecration, then Christ's visible return to end human rebellion forever. Now, look around at our world in 2025. Are we seeing the conditions these ancient writers predicted? Global deception spreading through technology platforms that can influence billions of minds simultaneously. Moral boundaries collapsing as societies abandon biblical definitions of right and wrong. Natural disasters intensifying in frequency and severity, exactly as Jesus predicted. Wars and rumors of wars multiplying as nations choose sides for what appears to be a global conflict. Persecution of biblical faith increasing as governments and institutions become increasingly hostile to Christianity. And all of this happening as we approach the 6,000-year completion point. But here's what the ancient sources understood that many modern Christians have forgotten. The transition from the 6th millennium to the 7th millennium wouldn't just mark a calendar change, it would mark the end of human government and the beginning of divine government. For 6,000 years, God has allowed humanity to try every form of government, every economic system, every philosophy, every religion, every ideology. Monarchies, democracies, socialism, capitalism, communism, fascism, humanity has tried them all. And they've all failed to create the perfect world. But when the 7th millennium begins, when Christ returns to establish his kingdom, human government ends forever. Not reformed, not improved, ended. The 6th day is when humanity tries to rule itself. The 7th day is when Christ rules everything. And here's what should make every believer's heart race with anticipation. If we're approaching the 6,000-year mark, then we're approaching the moment when every promise God has made about the future will begin to be fulfilled. No more war, no more poverty, no more disease, no more death, no more corruption, no more injustice. Everything broken will be fixed. Everything stolen will be restored. Everything wrong will be made right. But it all begins when the 6th millennium ends and the 7th millennium begins. And according to the calculations of ancient Jewish sages, early Christian fathers, and modern biblical chronologists, that transition may be happening in our lifetime. We may not just be living through the end of an age, we may be living through the birth pangs of paradise. The question isn't whether this transition will happen. The ancient sources are unanimous that it will. The question is whether we're the generation that gets to witness it. And if the numbers are accurate, if the timeline is correct, if the signs are pointing to what they appear to be pointing to, then we are. We are living at the most significant moment in human history since creation itself. The footsteps are getting louder. The birth pangs are getting stronger. The transition is approaching. Are you ready for the 7th day to begin? Let me paint you a picture of what the Bible actually teaches about this coming 7th millennium, because what you're about to hear will make you understand why the completion of 6,000 years is such a monumentally significant moment. Revelation 20. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. Satan bound for 1,000 years. No more deception, no more temptation, no more evil influence on earth. But that's just the beginning. Isaiah 11:6-9 describes the physical transformation of the earth itself. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb. The leopard shall lie down with the young goat, the calf and the young lion, and the fatling together. And a little child shall lead them. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. Picture a world where predators become peaceful, where children play safely with lions, where violence doesn't exist because the knowledge of God covers every square inch of the planet. Isaiah 65:20 through 25 gives us even more stunning details. No more shall an infant from there live but a few days, nor an old man who has not fulfilled his days. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox. A world without premature death, economic exploitation, crime, pollution, or disease. This is what happens when the seventh day begins. Discovery 5. The 70th Jubilee Cycle, a prophetic countdown. Because there's another ancient timeline that converges with the 6,000-year pattern, and when you see how they align with mathematical precision, it's going to completely transform how you understand God's prophetic timing. What I'm about to reveal isn't just biblical numerology or creative interpretation. This is a divine timing system that God Himself established in Scripture, and it's been counting down for over 3,400 years toward a conclusion that may arrive in our lifetime. The Jubilee system, God's built-in restoration countdown. God established this prophetic timing mechanism in Leviticus 25:8 through 10. And you shall count 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years. And the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be to you 49 years. Then you shall cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the Day of Atonement you shall make the trumpet to sound throughout all your land. And you shall consecrate the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land, to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family. On the surface, this looks like an ancient economic regulation. Every 50 years, debts were forgiven, slaves were freed, and land was returned to its original owners. But what most people miss is that the Jubilee system was never just about economics. It was about prophetic timing and divine restoration. The Jubilee cycles were God's way of structuring history into measurable prophetic periods, with certain Jubilees marking the most significant events in His redemptive plan for humanity. And here's what's going to absolutely stagger you. If you calculate the Jubilee cycles from the time they were first established, we may currently be living in the final Jubilee period before Christ's return. Let me show you the mathematical precision that will blow your mind. According to biblical chronology, the Jubilee system was officially established around 1406 BC, when Israel entered the Promised Land under Joshua's leadership. From that starting point, Jewish scholars and biblical chronologists have tracked Jubilee cycles for over 3,400 years. Each Jubilee cycle lasts exactly 50 years. That means from 1406 BC until today, 2025 AD, we can calculate exactly how many complete Jubilee cycles have occurred. 1406 BC to 2025 AD equals 3,431 years. 3,431 years divided by 50 years per cycle equals 68.62 cycles. That means 68 complete Jubilee cycles have been completed, and we're currently in the 69th cycle. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. According to some calculations that account for different dating methodologies and calendar adjustments, we may actually be living in the final years of what could be the 70th Jubilee cycle since the system was established. And the number 70 in biblical prophecy is the number of divine completion.